Hi, Dr. Ray. It is so nice to see you. So for everyone listening, this is Dr. Ray Burns. We were in school together, and I had the beauty of meeting him when he was already a naturopathic doctor and then was getting his doctor of chiropractic. So he is a very intelligent and well-rounded practitioner. And I wanted to do this video with him so that we could talk to you guys about food and shopping and how to shop and how to find better food and what you can do to make your diet and your food better overall. So I'm going to be walking around Natural Grocers, which is a great kind of like mom and pop Colorado grocery store, kind of akin to Whole Foods, but less commercialized. And Dr. Ray is going to give me some of his thoughts. And he has been a naturopath for, let's see, you said 22 years, right? Or I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit.
2000. Well, I was a former professional ATV racer, and as most racing careers do, it ended in injury. Those were concussions. And in working with a chiropractor, attempting to alleviate headaches, he sent me to a naturopath, and I got on the path of clinically verified medical nutrition and a proper chiropractic protocol, and was able to regain my health to a large extent, and believed that fully that there was the herbal and homeopathic remedies that took me there, along with a better diet and lifestyle changes. And of course, importantly, not hitting my head any longer. That was important.
That does make a difference.
What it did was change my perspective on health, and in that really began to look at the food web. So much so I got interested enough to go get educated myself. I did a correspondence and clinical program, working with patients that are what most doctors just call train wrecks. And I look at from the mineral perspective. We do not eat nor consume in our diets, even through supplementation, the appropriate amount nor the correct amount of nutrients on a basic level, and that's worldwide. It's exacerbated in certain instances here in America, but we suffer from the lack of nutrition. That's largely what fuels this dis-ease within our cultures. And as this food web has grown to a very large business model, went from 45 million farmers to 1.8 million farmers. And that has separated most of us from what it is that we do when we eat, what we participate in. And that is food. It's more than just a product that sits on the table. And I like your approach as well. You've taken that chiropractic approach, and you've also incorporated lifestyle changes. That's what's going to make the difference. We have to make good choices.
I couldn't agree with you more. The lifestyle is just such a huge part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of walk in here, and I'm going to flip my camera around for you guys. So this is usually where I start, right? I like to do what I call perimeter shopping. And when you do perimeter shopping, it means that you're going to be walking past all the nice fresh fruits and veggies, and then usually along the meats. And so these are the sections that I try to stick to, because as soon as you start to enter in to the sections that have packaged foods and different things like that, that is when you start to deal with a lot of the complications around food. Now, one of the reasons that I love Natural Grocers is because I don't really have to worry about pesticides. Everything here is organic, so I don't have to look twice at all the labels and worry about what I'm getting. And that's one of the reasons I like coming here, is it's so much easier. Plus, everyone's super friendly. So for myself, some of my staples at home is I tend to have a lot of kale around, and I'll saute that. I'll put it in shakes. I will make it with sausage. I'll put it on like spaghetti squash, you name it. And then I also love having plenty of broccoli around, plenty of celery, plenty of carrots. You can put those into a bone broth. You can eat it as a snack with hummus. It's an easy thing that you can take to work, and things will just be ready. I love to have rainbow chard around and all of that, asparagus. The cruciferous veggies are particularly helpful for helping your body cleanse its own hormones, and we don't get hormone buildup. So if you're struggling with hormone dysfunction, sometimes eating those types of veggies can help. And as I walk to the next section, I'll let Dr. Ray give me any of his thoughts on what I just commented on.
Absolutely. And to have that blessing of organic food in your circle is very good. It's something that's essential. I found the amount of herbicide, in particular the product Roundup and its compatriot names, found in the market. It's actually glyphosate, which is a glycine and a phosphate stuck together. Very reactive. And it's what we are bathing our food in. And if you want to define this product, it's an antibiotic. So we're treating the common food market with an antibiotic and then wondering why it's having that same effect in the body. And it is. So to have an organic food source is essential. Now,
when I always tell
you and I have the same problems. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say one of the things I always find funny about pesticides that a lot of people don't realize is how they actually work on the insects, and how they actually work is they disrupt the intestines and the gut of the insect, and they kill them from the inside out. So why we didn't think that would happen to us when we used it, I don't know why. But please go ahead.
And largely the bulk of issues in my clinic are stomach issues, digestive issues of some kind, from what people put in their mouths to what it's not happening on the other side. And it's everything in between. So it's food. We know that it's food. And of course, I started to say the same issue is perplexing for both the patients and people around the world. We have a budget issue when it comes to food. You know, organic is expensive, right? It's 12 to 25% higher in the food market than everything else. I say you can really offset that by doing a little bit of your own food growing and participating in that local food web, showing up at a local farm, participating in some fashion where you can connect yourself to that food and lower the costs. It isn't going to happen necessarily in a week. And it might take you an entire growing season to do so. But I do believe that for security reasons, as much as health, that reconnection with food is also going to give you the appreciation to eat the better food. And you're going to, of course, the side effect is to feel better, right? And to be better. And that's exactly what we're aiming for.
Couldn't have said it better.
Continue with the tour.
So one of the other things I wanted to comment on for people, because I'm a huge fan of probiotics, right? And I love kombucha and stuff, and I know a lot of other people love kombucha. However, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that some of your favorite kombuchas have like 18 grams of sugar. So when you're looking at the labels, you have to make sure to also look at, okay, this one actually is a serving size, 1 bottle. So this is 6 grams of sugar. That one's not too bad. Now let's go to like one of these. All of a sudden, we're up to 12 grams of sugar. And then if we look at some of these, also 12 grams of sugar, and that's 12 grams of added sugar. And some of them will say like 8 grams of sugar, but you don't realize that there's like a serving is half of a bottle, so that actually means 16 grams of sugar. So like some of my favorites are like this brand, which in total has 8, but that's still fairly high. So just if you are looking at kombucha or drinks, make sure to actually read the label and read how much sugar is in it, because I think that's one of the most passive ways that we can consume too much sugar really easily is by just drinking our calories. And then this is one of my other aisles that I like to educate people on. So Natural Grocers is particularly good at having a lot of alternative options so that you are actually able to avoid gluten or avoid corn if you need those things. And I love the Terra chips, but again, it's really important to read the label. So these guys, even though they're great, they have a bunch of canola oil. So there's another one that they have that's specifically done in like coconut oil or avocado oil. And then you're going to be able to avoid those inflammatory oils, which is a really nice option. And then they have other ones that allow you to do something made out of beans. You can have a chip made out of beans if you have to avoid corn, things like that. Or plantain strips are another really good option. Sometimes you can do corn, but if you're in the healing phase for the gut, sometimes you have to avoid grains, and it's just like an easy way to do that. So, and then, yeah, I'm sure you and I could have a whole conversation about oils and stuff.
I was just to say we could do a whole special on oils.
Yes, definitely. And so you can see, like, as I'm starting to walk past all these aisles, this is where all the packaged stuff is. Not to say that it's like terrible, but it's just what I try to purchase less of, right? And then the same thing goes for like if you're getting some kind of granola, like this one has 6 grams of sugar, this one has 7 grams. And then I know that there's one that they have that's like 4 grams. So I try to go for the lower sugar contained ones. And if I'm doing anything like oats, I try to go for steel cut oats. And those are going to be the ones that don't have gluten and they take longer to cook. And that means that they have more fiber, which is overall healthier for your gut. When it comes to nut milks, even though these are able to be on the shelf, I find that that means they usually have some kind of preservative. So when I get anything having to do with nuts, I try to always find it in the refrigerated section. And that's going to mean that you are a little bit safer when coming to things like nuts. And that is one of the things I actually learned from natural grocers because they have everything, all of their nuts, all their seeds in the refrigerated section, which is because that helps prevent mold growth and all of that stuff. So let's see. And then, yeah, I'll let you comment if you have any thoughts on that.
It's great to see the nuts refrigerated. That is a preservation of the oils. It keeps it from going rancid. And just a brief moment about the oils. What Dr. Christine is talking about is, in particular, in human health, we're looking at a ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. Now, we'll define those as the number of carbons they have and their functions within the body. Omega-3s are the favored oils. We're going to find those in the good foods, the avocados, the walnuts, the good
fish,
the good quality, and fish. And supplementation with omega-3s is certainly essential in today's world. But we're trying to offset that extreme high imbalance of omega-6 fats that are found in corn, safflower, canola, rapeseed oil, palm oil, so on. Those types of oils do not digest well, and they do not mix with 50 plus different weighted oils of the brain. They feed a lot of people, but they do not promote human health.
Right. And that's one of the reasons they're so important, right? Is like as we move into this age of people moving towards dementia and being really confused as to why, the things that we're talking about right now are what contribute to that, because basically all of these oils are made of fat and all of your neurons are made of fat. And so if you eat a bunch of poor quality fat, you're going to have poor quality neurons. So this is why like the quality of what you're eating matters. And that's why I wanted to do this with him, right? Because we're talking about a lot of the invisible stuff. Like I could go down all these aisles and comment on things for you, but I feel like you guys know most of it. Like, you know, this is, most people see this and they're like, oh, let me flip the camera here. Most people see this and they're like, oh, gluten-free, great. But anything that comes in a container like this, you know, it's going to have some kind of preservatives in it. These ones are all pretty good overall, like compared to some of the other ones, but this is why I shop here. And I was thinking about doing another one another day at like a Safeway, which totally has some good options, but it's confusing to find. So I just want to show you guys some of my things that I like. So like I'm pretty gluten-free, right? And I try to avoid corn when I can. So cassava flour tortillas are one of my favorite tortilla replacements. It's basically just a root vegetable that's been turned into a really chewy tortilla. And I use that for food all the time. Eggs are one of the things that I can't really have anymore. And so I'm going to skip that section. But if you are ever doing eggs, it's really important that it says pasture raised and free range, which is completely different than cage free. Cage free doesn't really mean that much. So when we're at a store like this that's really conscious about their decisions, you can see that all of theirs are organic, free range, pasture raised, free range, pasture raised. So that's always what I tend to go for, because the cage free basically just means that the chickens are all hanging out in a warehouse together with no separation, and it's a pretty stressful environment for them, and then you eat all of those stressful hormones. So one of the other things Dr. Ray just mentioned is something called rapeseed oil, which a lot of people don't know is another name for canola oil. And I like oat milk as a replacement, right? But Oatly, which used to be one of my favorite brands and is very creamy and delicious, also has rapeseed oil, which means that it's full of those unhealthy fats he was just talking about. So even with like alternative milks, you still have to be careful about your brands. Forager is one of the only brands I've found that doesn't have that in it. And then my other favorite creamer is this one. by Laird, and it's awesome because it also has a bunch of adaptogenic mushrooms in it. So you get benefit to your adrenals and your stress system just by using this creamer, and it's really good and it's creamy. And that one's coconut milk. And so that's also a really nice option that I like. So then when we start to come, so I've like basically gone around the perimeter, right? Like I kind of skipped the middle sections because it's going to be most of those more snacky foods, but I can go back and look at a couple alternatives. So this section is the vegan cheese section. Now, vegan doesn't necessarily mean healthy. You have to be very careful with your vegan choices because of the oils that we were talking about, things like soy. And soy, it's very hard to find clean soy because of how it's subsidized by the government. It basically makes everything genetically modified. So if I were to go and pick a cheese alternative, one of the ones I like is Miocchios, and they are made from cashews. So that's a pretty clean option versus a lot of these other ones are kind of soy. I believe Violife is also another one that's not too bad. Mostly coconut oil, potato and corn, olive extract, beta carotene. So that one's not too bad, right? But a lot of the non-dairy cheese options that you find are going to basically be made from soy. And so overall, if you're dairy-free, I try to just avoid cheese and you just train yourself to eat things without cheese. And it's just a new way of doing things. And the same thing goes for vegan meats, right? Like people think Impossible Burgers are great because they're made of plants, except Impossible Burgers are made from soy and basically a bunch of omega-6 fats, and they're actually more inflammatory than red meat. So they're not really a super great option as you start to look at the oils and things like that. When it does come to meat, I will try to make sure to always get organic. I often will get one of these and I'll make it into an entire thing of bone broth and have bone broth and chicken for the week. If I'm buying things like bacon, sometimes I try to go for turkey bacon just to give my body a break from the acidity of pork. But if I am going to get bacon, I try to find something that's called uncured. Uncured basically means that it hasn't been soaked in sugar as a part of its processing. You also want no nitrates and antibiotic free. And then that means that the animal that you're consuming hasn't been stressed out itself and had that seriously affect the chemistry of the food. Now, Natural Grocers is also pretty good about having wild caught fish in their frozen section. And when it comes to fish, gotta be honest, I think the frozen section is the place to go because that's one of the only times you'll find wild caught, because farm raised salmon has now been proven to be a carcinogen because of the way they treat the fish. So if you're going to eat fish, you really want wild caught, and the frozen section is usually where you're gonna find it. Then when we come to these kinds of sections, again, this is more like your pre-prepared meals. Anything that's pre-prepared is going to have a lot of those preservatives in it. And the preservatives, like to some extent, they're not horrid, but they can really mess with your hormones. And so like if you're having hormone issues, it's a pretty good idea to just avoid preserved foods. So I'm going to pause because I know I said a lot and let Ray comment on anything.
No, you're correct. And from my perspective, food preservatives train wreck the endocrine system. That is your hormone system. And even back up one more step, that Impossible Burger that you mentioned, they had to develop a new type of way to measure the amount of estrogen in that food because of that food. It's so high in estrogen. It's just nonsense. So on and moving forward, labels are important. And when it comes to fish, that's a challenge. I live at the tip in Michigan. This is the greatest state ever. Lots of fresh fish, but even then we're finding toxicity in those fresh fish right out of the water. But a farm fish, and we'll keep this PG because there's families watching, what they feed those fish isn't food. Let's just call it recycled food.
That's a good way to put it.
So again, you want to know, that's where you want to know your food source. And if you live inland, of course, that's a challenge. And you do want to consume some fish. It's good for you. So, of course. Now, where are you at in the store? Are you to chocolate cookies yet?
No, say that again?
Are you to the chip cookies yet?
Oh, sorry, that was breaking up just a little bit. So, well, now I'm in the section where I'm by like a lot of baking goods. And so I think when people switch over to trying to eat good foods, right, it's like baking is one of the things that they really, really miss. So I want people to know, like, in general, when I'm telling you to eat well, like what I want you to eat is vegetables, nuts, seeds, and protein. And like, that's your foundation. Now, if you do want to bake, because let's be real, like we all want to live a little bit. I try to use nut flours, and then you can literally make like a pancake out of nut flours with no egg, and you just replace the egg with flax. So if I am going to be baking, I try to do something like I'll use like some potato starch sometimes, but like almond flour, coconut flour. Coconut flour is great, but it's a little bit drier, so that you can actually use it in a different way to kind of dry something out. So once you start to learn the properties of the flours a little bit, you can get pretty creative with them. So this is a very good wall of like all the alternatives flour, right? Like we have amaranth, we have dark rye, we have semolina, we have oat, we have brown rice, white rice, buckwheat, quinoa, coconut, almond. So like there's so many different choices, and that's why I wanted to do a video like this. I just want to educate people about like the different options that you have. And so let's say you make that pancake or whatever, right? Now, if you dump a bunch of maple sugar on it, that's going to mean that you're consuming a ton of sugar. But if you do like a nut-based pancake, and then you do like a little bit of agave on it, I mean, you're still gonna, that's what I consider a cheat meal, right? For myself, because I don't eat like gluten-based pancakes anymore. But I'll try to do something like that if I'm trying to live a little, and I'll add some blueberries to it for the sweetness rather than like chocolate chips. And if we do come to the dairy section and you do okay with dairy, I actually tend to recommend goat milk to a lot of people instead of cow milk. It just tends to sit better with people. Like they tend to be less irritable to the proteins. And then there's something in goat milk where the way the protein is packaged and something called a chylomicron makes it easier for your gut to actually absorb it. And then in this section, let's say you can't have dairy, but you're a butter fiend, right? Miyokyos actually makes a cashew-based butter, and it's really, really good. They even have an oat milk butter. So those things exist. And again, that's like my main point of doing this, right? Is showing you different options that exist, like cauliflower linguine. So like if you want pasta, you can get a vegetable-based pasta. That one's in the refrigerated section. And so just stuff like that. And then you can always buy things in bulk. Let's see here if there's another good place for me to go down. Okay, let's talk about the sweets, right? Because again, you have to live a little, I get it, but let's just do it intelligently. So out of this entire sweets section, if I had to pick one thing, I'm going to come to like this chocolate bar because it's dark chocolate. It's over 70%. It's vegan, which means that it doesn't have egg and dairy in it, has no palm oil, has no lecithins, no emulsifiers, no sugar alcohols, no refined sugar. So it's like, I really like this brand. They do a pretty good job on the natural front of things. So like if I have to go for a sweet, that's usually my pick. Or even this brand, they do stevia sweetened. Now, if you're doing an alternative sweetener, it can be okay, but some of them still stimulate an insulin response. So you don't want to like pound the sweeteners, right? All these things I'm showing you, it's still about moderation. And I'm showing you my cheats right now, right? Like that good chocolate, I still treat that as a cheat versus like I can have that as a part of my regular diet. So it's starting to think about things like that. And then again, processed areas, that's unless I'm getting something like beans to make a chili, these are areas that I tend to try to avoid a little bit. There are a couple good seasonings. So like if you're a less experienced cook and you just want some good flavor, this Simply Organic seasoning, which is even available in things like King Soopers and Safeway sometimes, that's a pretty generally good seasoning. And then that makes for a really quick thing that you can add. A lot of hot sauces are still okay. Just check and make sure they don't have a bunch of added sugar and things like that. And then when we come, let's say you are doing like one of the veggie pastas, right? So like, let's see, these are all grains. I know they have like a seaweed based one. Black bean spaghetti, edamame spaghetti, but edamame is soy, so you got to be careful on the soy. But red lentil pasta, those kinds of things, those are good replacements. Then when we get to the sauces, now let's say that you are a little bit sensitive to histamines and you tend to get itchy. A lot of people don't realize that tomato is a histamine food. And if you tend to get itchy, you might want to avoid tomato sauce directly because it's a really high concentration of tomato going into your system and it can make you itchy. But they do make things like vegan Alfredo sauce. I really like this one, and that one's made from cashew. So those things also exist. But just like these little tips and tricks, right, of like different foods have different things. And then I'll usually keep some rice to have on hand because that's really easy to cook up. Or quinoa, if you are vegan or vegetarian, is a great source of protein and amino acids. So I'm a big fan of quinoa as well. It's just like something to have around as a staple. I try to go for that over other things. And when it comes to veggies and whatnot, I try to go for like complex carbs if I'm doing something like potato for a carbohydrate. Now, other nice thing about natural grocers, they have a beauty products section that has also been vetted. And I think beauty products are probably one of the hardest things to find non-toxic options for. And I think it said that like on average, your average American woman puts like 111 chemicals on her face before she leaves the house. And so these brands like Dr. Bronner's tend to be a little bit gentler on your system. So I also like getting personal products here. So I basically come here for most of what I need. And then if I need something like Ziploc bags, which they don't sell here, then I can go to another store for that. But most of the time I try to do all my stuff here. So I know Ray wanted to comment on different supplement brands because he is a wealth of knowledge on this stuff. So I'm going to walk through the supplement section here and he can give us some thoughts on some of his brand quality types of information.
Well, I definitely always want to find an American-made supplement company.
Okay.
I use just a handful in my clinic, but recommend that if you're going to go into the marketplace, find a reputable supplement company that is using U.S. sourced ingredients. And of course, the importance of the correct mineral when you're taking a mineral or vitamin is always correct. It's always important. And that brand that you're featuring there,
I do like Garden of Life.
By a very, very, yeah. Some of their product is fantastic. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
Just use
educate us.
Look at the ingredients. That's really key. And with individual mineral supplements, be sure that you're taking, for example, the right kind of magnesium or the right kind of zinc. The marketplace is not regulated by the FDA, and I'm not asking for it to be. But you do want to make certain some discretion and ask some questions about what it is that you're taking in. Should it be taken at all with other supplements?
I'm seeing if I can find their magnesium section, but I really do agree with him. And like, if you're ever getting probiotics, they should probably also be in the refrigerated section. And this is why Dr. Ray and I spend so much time researching brands. Like, there are some brands here that I would use, but I specifically use brands that are only available to practitioners as well, because they're often third-party verified, which is something I really value. And so then, there's things like this where it's like a calcium magnesium mix. And this is where it's really nice to do lab testing with a naturopath or a functional medicine doc so that you can figure out like, well, do you actually need extra calcium? Because most of the time it's that you need extra magnesium. So like a lot of people think that we need more calcium than we do, because you get a lot of calcium from different things, including things like spinach. And there's different ways to get extra vitamins out of it. Like, you can add lemon juice to spinach and get more iron out of it. So it's really helpful to basically start to just think about these things, right? And this is why I like coming somewhere like this, because I'm going to trust these brands over, I don't know, something like Safeway, or I'd be way more picky about my brands at Safeway. And so they even have like different kinds of adaptogen support and mushroom support and all the things like that. So I'm going to start to kind of walk outside here, and then we can have the rest of our discussion about agriculture. And then I know Dr. Ray has basically been standing out in his giant garden this whole time, which is really cool that he has created that with his family. And I know he had some thoughts on just the food web and our food system and how agriculture has just really taken a toll on the quality of our food and why it can be so hard to find different quality foods and things like that. So I would love to hear any thoughts that you want to share with us regarding that.
Well, I'm going to pull up a bucket in my tomato greenhouse. And when I say mine, I haven't built the greenhouse. My wife does all the gardening here. I'm just a laborer. But what's really made this an effort in my mind is this things that I'm interested in about 1995. What I saw changing in farming, and largely it was the application of an herbicide, which then became genetically woven into the fabric of the seed. The seed produces its own herbicide now. Where are we?
Wow.
Yeah. And when I saw this coming and the people involved, they're not going to fail at doing what it is they want to do to the food web. I do believe they will at some point fail to produce food.
And I want to make sure people can see anything that you're showing. And I'm just a little frozen on this end. So maybe just turn your camera off and turn it back on, and then we can see your luscious garden. Since he's out in the middle of his greenhouses, we are battling for service, but we thought it would be really cool to be able to show you guys this. There we go.
I should step back on. Okay, is that working?
It's a little bit better.
Okay. I bet I was sitting in the shade cloth, the area where it was shaded. I'll step back this way.
No
Okay.
worries.
So,
but yeah, please keep telling us about the seed.
I began to see the changes coming in the agricultural system. And growing up in Southeast Michigan, as I did, large industrial farm operations in that southeast part of the area. It's an hour or so west of Detroit. And watched that from a view where I started to think long term about where that was going, and saw the family farmer in my area vanishing. And what was rising up in the ashes of those small family farms are corporate conglomerate farms, where now if you're not farming 10, 15, 20,000 acres, you're not only not going to be competitive, you can't even have enough clout at the bank to borrow the money to go plant next year's crop. And I saw that implication coming quickly, and we're here. We have changed the food web. Cargill, ADM, Monsanto, they run the food show. There's only 6 food companies in the United States, and that's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And when I look at it, it's not a doomsday thing. It's a common sense picture in front of us, and we have the choice to take some action now. And when I say action, I say local food. I do all I can in my area to promote not just the growth of food in your backyard, but to support the growth of the local food purchase web. We saw just briefly what could happen at the start of the pandemic with food disruptions. They're promising more of that. And when I say they, there's always this conspicuous they. It's the food companies. And I don't look at food as anything more than the most powerful weapon on earth, if it can be used that way. And that gives us a lot of power, though. We can make those changes. And I do believe it starts in your own backyard, whether you're container gardening on your back patio, because it's all the space that you have, or you're participating in a local food plot where many hands make light work of growing an acre of food, or you've maybe approached a local landowner who's got a city lot that's empty, no house on it for many years. Get creative, find people like you, and connect in that food web. It's essential for your human health, as well as, I believe, what's going to be our cultural health in the long run. And I don't think they're going to win this battle long term, but they are disrupting the food system now. And they're certainly reducing the density of nutrition in the food. And that's why I grow food. Not because I don't want the ease of going to the grocery store and buying organic food, but because I can grow food far higher in nutrition than I can pay for any price. So I'll leave it back to you. I think you got muted.
Thank you. I didn't want to give you
There we
parking
go.
lot noise. I said that's a really good point, right? Because just because you buy something that has the label organic, that doesn't mean that it has the same nutritional quality that our grandparents' food had 50 years ago before all these chemical changes started taking place. So like I purchase organic because it's the best I can do. And that's all we can do in this world, right? Like it's impossible to be perfect. It's impossible to avoid all the toxins. Like the world just is what it is. And now we just have to learn how to adapt. I mean, that's what Darwin said, right? It's like the strongest species is not the fittest one, it's the most adaptable one. So you just have to adapt. So when your food starts getting poisoned by business, then you just try to vote with your dollar and you purchase what type of food you want to have. And so I go for organic when I can, but just like Ray is saying, it's really, really hard to get a full nutritional content out of food compared to 50 years ago. And so this is why it can be really beneficial to grow your own food. You actually have higher nutritional concentrations. And I'll have patients ask me like, well, you know, why should I supplement with minerals? Like I should be getting it all from my food. Yeah, you're right. You should. But it's really, really hard these days unless you're growing all your own food. And even then it's challenging. So it's like, that's where nutritional supplementation can be helpful. And like, if you're a pretty healthy person, then it's like, I think like a multivitamin and a mineral can sometimes be helpful, but you may not need it. And that's why it's really important to consult with your physician or your naturopath or your functional medicine doctor and ask them what's right for you. And that's why I love doing custom lab work, is because I can't tell you how many times I see people that have similar conditions, but totally different nutritional needs when I actually run the labs. And so that's where it can be really helpful. Like you can't just assume everybody needs the same thing. And I think the points that he's making about the food web and stuff, you know, that's when we start thinking bigger. And it's really easy to get kind of wrapped up in your day-to-day life and just like not really worry about that stuff. But when you do start thinking bigger like that, like if you guys have watched some of the videos I've done before, there was an exercise about doing a meditation around the supply chain. It's like, if you're ever feeling alone, I want you to think about all of the people it took for me to have this pair of headphones, right? Like to get the materials to make the headphones, to put it through the factory, to drive it to the store, to sell them to me at the store. That's a lot of support. I'm suddenly supported by all those people. And the same thing goes for your food, right? So it's like you have the people picking the food, you have the people transporting it. And a lot of people, they'll buy meat. And just like Ray was saying, it's like you have such a bigger appreciation for your food when you actually grow it yourself, because we've become so disassociated from the amount of work it takes to grow vegetables or to raise an animal that we then use for protein. It's like, it can be very humbling to meet some of your local farmers, or maybe like participate with some friends where you all purchase one cow together and then everybody gets, you know, parts of it, and you end up freezing some of it. And that's like a really quite a sustainable way to get good quality, like grass-fed, grass-finished beef. Because when it comes to meat, if you're eating meat that's not grass-fed, not grass-finished, kind of akin to like the pasture-raised eggs, then you can actually be eating some pretty inflamed meat. Because if you just feed cows like corn and things that they're not supposed to eat, then their gut biome gets messed up, and then their hormones get messed up, and then you're eating that cow's messed up hormones. And so it's like, this is where we kind of get caught in this whole cycle. So I know Ray had some other thoughts on like different ways that you can apply this to your life if you don't necessarily have the space or the resources to like grow everything yourself, right? And like, I live in an apartment and I just do some container gardening on my porch, and I can at least have like some vegetables from there. And so that's one easy way to do it. But just like he was saying, like there's lots of options. So if you have any other thoughts or kind of closing thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I appreciate the time, and I appreciate your mission. I really appreciate that you're looking at more than just our chiropractic background, and that there's more lifestyle and food connection to this. And asking the patient to be accountable is important. And the patient being accountable is important because they want the results as well. And I just praise you for your work. You're a bright light in school, and I just knew you were going to hit the ground running, and it's fantastic to see what you're doing.
Oh,
so I'm
thanks.
there to support you anytime, and always available for questions. And people, connect with your food. It makes a difference. And for everyone at my family, except my 2 children, who I wish they were standing here. They wanted to. We just pick on them about the amount of work it takes. But they'll look back and realize that connection to the food. And what I wanted them to understand through all of this was the importance of food. Put a good farmer in your life, be it you in your backyard or you participating maybe once a week for a couple hours after work one night in a local garden plot, or connecting with the farmer and investing in that farmer. Get a local food web going. It's not just for your food security, but good food is a blessing, and it's a blessing upon the body that we need. So I praise you for taking the time to walk around and explain some good choices to people. They're not stuck at Safeway, right?
No. And, natural grocers is mostly in Colorado, I think a few other states, but there's so many little grocery stores like that are more like locally owned and kind of more mom and pop. And I love doing that because it's like I need food way more often than I need like plastic items. And so it's like I would rather spend most of my time here where the clerks know my name and like we banter and stuff. And it's like it's good for community, it's good for your social health, it's good in so many different ways versus like these, big stores where it's just kind of really depersonalized. And, even if you're shopping at something like Whole Foods, like you still got to read the labels. Like Whole Foods does not make it healthy. They have quite a few unhealthy things there. And that's why I shop here. And the local mom and pop shops, significantly less expensive. So if you're wanting organic foods, like go to the local shops. They're going to be less expensive if budget is a concern. And then like you were saying, like I live in Arvada, right? That's basically a suburb in between Denver and the entrance to the mountains. Like I'm in a very suburbia area right now, like, tons of parking lots and highways and all that stuff. Literally just like 20 minutes west of me, there are some farmers, and that's like the space between Denver and the mountains. And I've made friends with those farmers, and oh my gosh, you have baby chickens. I love it. But yeah, you can make friends with those farmers, and then I buy goat milk from him directly, and it's so good. And so there's lots of ways to do that. Oh my goodness. They're so adorable.
Well, there's 100 of them in here.
Wow. Well, I'm so impressed with everything you've created.
Our money where our mouth is. Well, I appreciate that. It's a labor of love, but we found it important. It also it gives us that food security as well as, and I'll keep it quick as it goes. That's one side of the pantry, but that's what. 300 square feet of food. And this, of course, all came from here.
Wow. But I might be missing you a little bit just due to
those people that's listening. Back outside.
I missed a little bit of that because of the service, but that looked like a very impressive pantry. I'd love if you could send me a picture later, and then I can add it to the post.
Oh, certainly. And I'll never tell you where I live, but I'm teasing. No, I just wanted you to see that's a year's worth of effort, maybe a year and a half's worth of preservation, and puts more than a year's worth of food away. And then, of course, the chickens and so forth also put a bit more of a sustainable lifestyle. And we live way in the remote north, so it's essential for us to have the food security. But what it's done is increase the amount of density and really taught my children about food. And I find
well, and that's one of the other
blue sky. I'm sorry.
That's one of the other, no, I was going to say that's one of the other great things about this, right? Is like your kids are getting this entire education that they don't even realize that they're getting. And it's so important because when you think about it, it's like all we truly need to survive is like the ability to grow food, to cook it, and to like have community. And none of those are really taught in school very much. So it's an invaluable education, even if you're just teaching your kids like how to read labels or how to grocery shop, right? Labels are always the scariest thing, but if you can start to master reading labels just by looking at like the serving size and then looking underneath the box, because everyone tends to look at the box and they ignore what's underneath. But underneath the box, that's all the labeled ingredients. And they tend to put the thing that is highest content first and then go down to the lower content at the end of the list. So it's like if gluten is the first thing on there, then you know it's pretty high in gluten, that kind of thing. So anyway, this was awesome. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And if people want to like, oh, heck yeah. If people want to work with you or learn more about you, where should they go?
The best place to go right now is Ask the Quack at Proton Mail. If you'll send me an email, I'll respond. Ask the Quack at protonmail.com.
Awesome.
Great. And you keep up the work, Doc. Awesome.
You too. Thank you, Dr. Ray, and thanks for sharing your beautiful farm with us. It was great.
Thank you for letting me show it off a little. It's the labor of love for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll be well and connect anytime.
All right. Good one. Have a good one.
Thanks so much. You too.
Okay, so let's be real for a second, right? Like we just got to go through Natural Grocers, which is an amazing grocery store, and they do a really good job of having natural brands and different things like that. But for a lot of people, you may not have that option for you, and you may only have a Safeway somewhat near you or something like that. So I also want to show you how I shop when I go to a more conventional grocery store like Safeway. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm still going to do perimeter shopping, right? First thing I walk into is all the most addictive foods. I'm just like, not even going to go to that section. Let's go this direction. So then we also have some pre-prepared roasted chickens. That's pretty good, although that's definitely not necessarily an organic chicken. So, you know, if you have the option between eating chicken nuggets or that chicken, even though it's not organic, I'm still going to advocate that you go for that chicken. But if you can find one that's organic, that's ideal. Just means that they've been eating the right things, or pasture raised, or any of those other labels that we found. Then when we start to come to these aisles, we start to get to more of the processed food. So I'm literally just going to skip them all. And we're just going to start going over to the other sections. So this actually makes shopping at these grocery stores way easier, right? Because I just got to skip like so much stuff. Or actually cleaning products. That's something that we didn't totally go over at the last video. But when we come to cleaning products, I'm going to go for the ones that are dye and fragrance free, things like Open Nature. Seventh Generation is one of my other favorite brands that I totally approve of. So that goes with your dish soap. Like if you're washing your dishes and stuff, I want to do it with things that are going to be more natural. So, I mean, even though we have our brands that we really know, like Dawn and Ajax and Gain and Cascade, they have a lot of chemicals to them. So I try to go for the more natural ones that I pointed out. Same thing for laundry detergent. Tide, things like that, going to have some more chemicals in them. So there is Open Nature or Seventh Generation laundry detergent, and that's clothes that are going on your skin all day, and that matters. Like those chemicals absorb into your skin. Dryer sheets, I just don't even use them anymore. They can really disrupt your hormones. I will say, if you're going to go for one, Seventh Generation does make some. I just got the wool balls that you can put in, and they absorb the static, and they don't have any chemicals in them. They're just made of wool, and that is something that's reusable, and it's better for the earth too, because you're not producing a bunch more trash. So when we talk about perimeter shopping, so I just got to skip like half the store, right? And at the other end there's a bunch of juices. Overall, juice is not particularly great for you. Like a bottle of orange juice or a glass of orange juice has a ton of sugar in it and is usually quite processed. So I just like to kind of skip those. There are some more, so if you're going to go for juice, just look for a more natural one, more organic, less sugar, that kind of thing. So now when we come to the poultry section, looking through a lot of this, this is a dangerous label, right? All natural doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it's great that it was raised with no added hormones, but natural doesn't qualify as anything. So I'm going to look more for something like humane certified. I would be more willing to trust that. Like, yeah, it says 100% natural. It also says 100% vegetarian fed. It also says no antibiotics ever. So that's going to be the type of stuff I'm hoping for. The vegetarian fed isn't necessarily super great because it can mean that they're just eating corn, which they're also not supposed to eat. That's why pasture raised or free range. So out of all of these chicken cuts here, this would be the one that I'd purchase, is the organic free range with no antibiotics. That's going to be how to read those labels. All of these other ones that don't really have that, I'm going to trust less. It's not to say that there aren't some that aren't labeled organic that are still okay, because organic is a big certification process and not everyone likes to go through it. And sometimes you can still have brands that are okay that just aren't certified organic, but it's just a way that you can shop intelligently when you're looking. So then if I'm looking at things like red meats, I really like doing game meat. So things like elk or bison, and they tend to already be like pretty lean and no growth hormones ever administered. So actually I'm gonna get some ground elk because I love elk burgers, they're amazing. But when it comes to sausages, things like this, I'm not gonna go for Johnsonville. This is probably some of the most processed stuff out there. So I am gonna go and see if they have any sausages. And if you're looking for like a big cut of meat, right? So Natural Grocers does pretty well on their meat, but like sometimes I want a big chunk of meat to do in like a crock pot. Then I'll come and see if they have it here. But yeah, I mean, let's see. Let's take a look at this label here. Let's see. Can we trust this? So as I'm looking at this label, not giving me very much information. So for me, just because that label doesn't have the information and the things that I like to look for, it might be okay, but it's not my favorite. So I'm gonna keep looking. And if I can't find one that has the qualities that I like, then I'm just gonna like get something different. And like corned beef, delicious, also has a ton of sugar in it, just something not everybody knows. So just looking for those particular types of brands. So like if I come and I have the option, I'm gonna go with this over that because I don't necessarily know exactly where that comes from. And that's just like the small ways that you can start to make some more intelligent choices. Or here, like, okay, let's say I wanted a big cut of meat, but I couldn't get that. Then I came across this. I was like, grass-fed lamb, that sounds great. Let's do that. So I would go for that instead. I'm actually just gonna get some of this to have in the freezer. So anytime I find good meat, especially if it's already frozen, I just purchase it and then I keep it in my freezer. And then I just have this kind of stock of meat that I know is good in my freezer. So like these are gonna be probably some of your safer like ribs at Safeway, is that particular brand that we see again with those same labels. When I come across the sausages, it's pretty hard to find good sausage, right? Because a lot of them are just really processed and stuff. So, and then there's the Impossible Burger that Ray and I were talking about, which is just, I mean, the label makes it look great, right? It's like no cholesterol, no hormones, but it doesn't mention the fact that it's made of genetically modified soy and a lot of inflammatory oils. So that's why I'd be avoiding that. When it comes to fish, so Atlantic salmon fillet, fresh seasoned, that kind of pink probably died. So I am guessing this is going to be farm raised if I asked. So that's why I'm pretty careful about my fish. Whereas if I come to the frozen section, there we go. I'm able to find wild Alaskan pink salmon. Do you see what a different color that was from the other salmon? The other salmon was pinker, but that's because it had dye in it. So I'm always going to go for wild caught whenever I can. Let's see, as we continue walking along the frozen section. So yeah, if you're buying fish, I tend to go for frozen. It's really easy to thaw it out. You just put it in some water for an hour or something and it should de-thaw pretty quickly. You can go for the cod fillets or anything like that. They have swordfish, but then there are different types of fish that are higher in metal and mercury and things like that. So that's also things you want to look out for. Things like this, when it comes to feeding your kids, Lunchables, bologna, this is all just completely processed meat. I would advocate for not necessarily feeding your kid that, and preferably just making them a lunchable style thing. Sometimes you can freeze stuff and then it can be ready. So I would rather feed them something like turkey, which has tryptophan in it, which is a really important amino acid for all of your enzyme functions, for happy chemicals, all that. Out of all of this bacon that's here, I think I would go for Applegate. No sugar, uncured, no antibiotics, humanely raised. Maybe this open nature one that says about the same thing. Otherwise, I can skip the rest of the bacon. So all of a sudden, our grocery shopping almost got easier because now we know that there's only like 2 brands to choose from instead of 17. And that actually helps us out. When it comes to the veggie section, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go and look for the organic section, and that's the only place I'm going to buy stuff from. So I get to skip all of this stuff. Made my shopping a lot faster. And I'm going to come over here. And this is their small organic section, but this is where I'm going to choose my vegetables from. Same with here. Then as I start to finish my perimeter loop, we're fairly done, right? So it actually makes grocery shopping much easier. We have our pasta section and stuff, but again, I mean, let's just check it out. We'll see if they have any pasta alternatives. Nope, all those are pretty grain-based. Oh, hey, they do have a red lentil one and a chickpea one. So if you're gluten sensitive and you still want some pasta, those would be your options at Safeway. Obviously, if you're ever doing anything, if you can ever spot something organic, just go for that. But these are gluten-based, so then I'm going to go for the non-gluten-based one and approach it that way. So as I come through the rest of the aisles here, all of these rices that are pre-prepared, I'm going to kind of be wary of because they have a lot of the preservatives. But when you go for a bag of rice, you can have that around for a really long time and it's going to keep just fine, and it doesn't take that long to cook. So I think that covers most of what I wanted to show you, because the rest of this stuff, I mean, let's be real. It's not really food. This is fake food. And when we talk about not using vegetable oils, this is what I'm talking about. Like, please, please, please do not use canola and vegetable oil. This is some of the worst oil. And peanut oil, peanuts in general are not super great. So if you need some kind of oil, I'm going to ask you to go for any of these. So coconut oil, extra virgin refined coconut oil. Ghee is an alternative to butter that has a lot of the proteins that people are sensitive to cut out. Grapeseed oil is different than rapeseed oil. Rapeseed oil with an R is another name for canola oil. So grapeseed is different. Extra virgin olive oil, always going to be great. If you're doing high temperature cooking, then it's best to do something like avocado oil, just because it doesn't necessarily go rancid at high temperatures. So that would be something like this. So olive oil versus avocado oil. There's avocado oil. So something like that. And then if you are, let's say you're dealing with SIBO, but you miss garlic, but you can't necessarily have garlic because it aggravates your gut with IBS, this is a way to get a garlic flavor without necessarily having to deal with the components of garlic that irritate you. So that's another solution. And then you can also use things like sesame oil and sunflower oil. Sunflower oil is not my favorite, but it does have certain benefits. Like if you are a female trying to regulate your hormones, you can actually do something called seed cycling. And the oils kind of count, but it's more helpful if you can do it with the actual seeds themselves. And basically what that is during a time when you're trying to help your body produce estrogen, you generally want to do more like flaxseed. And then at a time when you're trying to produce progesterone, you want to do sesame and sunflower seed. So you can do something like flaxseed during the first half of your cycle, and then sunflower and sesame seed during the second half of your cycle. And using these different seeds at these different times actually help you re-regulate your cycle a little bit. So there are things like that that you can also take into consideration. But I just wanted to give you a quick little glance inside another store, because I know specialty stores aren't everywhere. And so it's, again, just about learning how to read labels, learning brands that are okay, asking the clerk if you have a question for like, hey, I'm looking for this, but I want it natural in this, like, what's the closest thing you have? They may not know, but no harm in asking. And then once you start to learn those brands, you can generally find them in different places or order them online. And it just, once you get a routine down, it makes your life a lot easier. It's just figuring it out in the first place. So anyway, you're doing great. Keep that.